Okay. Okay. So, hi everyone, and welcome to the ITSS Verona member series on artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, and space. Today we have the immense pleasure to talk about cybersecurity with Andrea Rigoni from Deloitte Risk Advisory. Welcome, Andrea, and thank you for being here with us.
Good morning. Thank you, everybody.
So Andrea has been working in the information security sector for more than 25 years. He serves as an advisor to NATO and the UN. He has also served as advisor to the Prime Minister of the Italian Republic, and he is now a partner at Deloitte Risk Advisory focusing on cybersecurity. So Andrea, if it's okay with you, I will jump right into the questions.
Of course, of course.
Okay, so the first question that I wanted to ask you is, due to the current global pandemic crisis, organizations had to disperse their employees to remote working environments, leaving themselves more vulnerable to attack due to insecure networks. So an increase of cyber attacks during the coronavirus crisis have shown how important it is to protect critical infrastructures, such as, for example, hospitals and research centers. So the question is, how is the cybersecurity field adapting to the rise of cyber threats caused by the new working conditions?
Thank you, Tommaso. And, of course, with the pandemic, we really had a tsunami, not only in our, normal life, but also in its translation in the digital domain. The first big change has been the adoption of digital technologies for allowing employees, public officials to be able, to work from home. And despite the majority of the organizations, were ready to have some ways of, remote collaboration, they were not ready at all to have all their employees, working remotely. So first, there has been a change in traffic volumes, the number of employees connecting from home. The second big change has been moving to digital services also for financial services. So it's not only the employees, it is my grandmother that could not go to the bank branch office and has been advised by her bank, to use the internet banking. So there has been an explosion of digital services for critical services like, financial sector, accessing the public administration, and of course, also in business. This is heaven for every kind of threat actor in cyberspace, because you have more users that are completely lost in the digital space. I mean, it's like when you land in a new environment, in a new country, in a new city, new culture, you're not able to detect and easily recognize, where are the threats. And the same happens in the digital space. So unfortunately, there has been at the same time an explosion in cyber attacks, targeting everybody, financial sector customers, of course, money, research centers, billions and trillions of dollars invested in research for identifying new vaccines. So it's much better than gold. Third, every kind of intellectual property developed by large and even small and very small companies have been moved to the digital space. Changing these configurations, I said, is heaven for criminals and every kind of threat actor, but it's a nightmare for organizations and governments in order, to protect the services. Why it's a nightmare? Because our services have been designed and developed over the decades not to be secure by design. It's true that regulators all over the world are saying that, you need to think your digital services in a secure way, like, you think about an airplane. You don't want an airplane to be unsecure. You want it to be secure, by design, by the first time you think about the airplane. But the reality is very different. So that's, today, what's happening. We have a massive shift to digital services, and we have infrastructures and services and people that are not ready, and that will take years to be fixed.
Wow, thank you. Thank you so much for this answer. The second question that I wanted to ask you is, could you give a comment on the biggest current challenges that, in your opinion, are in the field of cybersecurity? For example, I'm thinking about the introduction of the 5G network, which has caused great public interest. So what are the main threats, but also at the same time, the opportunities that these new networks could offer us?
5G is becoming a reality all over the world. I mean, its adoption is increasing. Telcos are making, big investments. Are also at the center. I mean, 5G networks at the center of, political and diplomatic debates between, large economic and digital superpowers. But let's look at the reality. I mean, 5G is an evolution. It's not bringing a disruption in the digital space. So right now, I would say that the impact in terms of more exposure is less than 2-3%. Of course, this is going to change because over time, 5G will introduce completely different configurations. So the way not only the individuals, but the digital assets, my telephone, my electric switch, my fridge, will be able to talk each other. So again, what I mentioned before is a change in the configuration. Every time we change, the configuration, we change the system, we open the door, to new weaknesses and new vulnerabilities. But that is connected to a challenge that will be amplified by 5G, but is there, today, that is orchestrating an incredibly complex and crowded ecosystem. That's the challenge that today all actors, starting from governments, they need to face. Why the orchestration? The orchestration because differently from the physical space, where a government could have, the control over a domain, the sea, the air, through the armed forces. When it comes to digital, that kind of control is mainly in the hands of private organizations. I mean, at the end, the majority of the cyberspace is owned and controlled by private companies. They are the ones that they need to protect it, and they do it in their interest, using, the knowledge, the skills, and the tools they have available. So what we have is a cyberspace, not only at national level, but at global level, that is heavily interconnected and interdependent, and a defense that is a set of trenches where every trench speaks a different language. They don't know what's happening in the war theater, and they have no way of coordinating. Now, that's an extreme vision, but not very far, from the reality. So, which is the biggest challenge? The biggest challenge for everybody, starting from governments, is moving to a new orchestration where every actor is not just responsible of its little piece, but he is part of a bigger defense plan. I'm a small company producing a very simple technology, and I protect it based on the risks I think my technology could be exposed. I don't see that, my small technology could become part, of a bigger threat, so an impact that goes beyond, the boundaries of my own business. That's where governments, they need to play a role. Now, this kind of orchestration is key at national level. Why? Because there are thousands of actors of different nature, small companies, research, companies developing, new technologies, the critical infrastructures, the public services, the essential services like financial sector and electricity. All of them, they need to play together like in a symphony. Today, it's more noise rather than, an enjoyable music.
So basically, this orchestration and how all these mechanisms will be intertwined together will be of fundamental importance in the future.
Of course, of course.
Okay, thank you. So third question is, when it comes to interstate cyber threats, how do we differentiate traditional surveillance and tolerable behavior from threats and offensive attacks that need to be stopped?
So, first of all, I think, a good foundation is to consider cyber as a domain, as a vehicle, and, the activities performed by threat actors might be, a country, might be a criminal group or a terrorist group, based on their, traditional impact. It doesn't matter if the attack is coming from cyber or from the real kinetic world. What we look as is at the real impact. So from that perspective, there's not a big difference between the traditional, including what is tolerable and what is not. Now, it's too easy because the digital dimension, so the cyber, is changing the way we live. I mean, if 10 years ago, the digital was a mean, was a media, and it was playing a supportive role to business and social life. Today, I mean, we live in the digital space. And I think for the majority of us, the pandemic demonstrated that we're living most of our business and sometimes also personal life in the digital space. Now, that is changing the way we should analyze and we should consider the impact of any kind of digital disturbance, digital intrusion, or digital or cyber attack. So something that, so the metrics we were using in the past, I don't think are valid anymore. And I don't think there's an alignment or there is agreement, globally, if, a disruption in terms of, take fake news, for example, or take, the inability to have, a normal social life, through digital, a few years ago, you would have never considered that a major impact for a country or for a category of people. Today, I suppose the majority of the citizens would put them, in a higher importance or higher priority than other, essential services.
Thank you. Now we have our last question, which is in a certain sense linked to this previous one. And it is, under what circumstances does a cyber attack constitute an act of war? And is actually cyber war a real possibility in the future?
So this is a topic that is keeping busy thousands of researchers, globally, to find these definitions and the boundaries. The reality is that we are today in a constant war. Of course, it's a completely different war, from the past, but there are cyber powers, and we have plenty, of cyber powers that are playing in an offensive and in an offensive role in the cyberspace. So war today is a reality. It's simply a war with different, that we perceive in a completely different way, because there are no physical weapons involved. Most of the times, the effects of the war are not directly visible. There is an economic war in place between many relevant superpowers, including cyber superpowers, where the final objective is the economic or the knowledge supremacy, and we don't see people in the streets involved in this war. That might be even worse. So first, we are in the middle of a war. Can this war escalate to a kinetic war? So where a country might use engage in armed conflict as a retaliation of a cyber attack. Now, of course, that is possible. I mean, if we're talking about a conflict, that is one of the means. and one of, unfortunately, of the possibilities. But not being a military expert, but being involved in, cyber discussions all day, I see not wise, to move to an armed conflict when the war theater, is the cyberspace. A cyber attack might be much less expensive, much more effective than a kinetic war. So potentially, the future is, we need to prepare to cyber defend our countries and our critical assets. And by the way, it's no secret that the majority of the advanced countries have already started and have already developed cyber armed forces, both with defensive intents and offensive capabilities to better defend the country. Then we might open a big debate how an offensive approach is really the right solution when we have infrastructures at national level that are incredibly weak. So the debate is, maybe the best offense is to have a very, very strong defense, so that I lower the interest and the probability, of an enemy to target me. That's one of course, of the hypotheses. But for sure, we are today in the middle of not just one cyber war, of hundreds of different cyber wars that most of the times we don't see.
And the possibility that these wars will escalate to a military conflict are actually at the moment pretty low, we have said, right?
I mean, yes, to summarize, in my opinion, it is possible, but based on the observation on all the recent happenings, I think today it would be very unwise. And so, I think its probability today is pretty low.
Okay. Thank you so much, Andrea. It's been very interesting and an honor for me to interview. Thank you so much.
Thank you.